We look at so many passages, and as we look at them, we just say, I heard it, been there, done that type of thing. And one of which is found back in the book of Hebrews. And it's in Hebrews, the 2nd chapter. And the writer here is trying to get the brethren to really waken up to what we have been blessed with. So look back into that 2nd chapter and look at verse 14 with me. Since then, the children share in flesh and blood. He himself likewise also partook of the same, that through death he might render powerless him who had the power of death, that is, the devil, and might deliver those who, through fear of death, were subject to slavery all their lives. For assuredly, he does not give help to angels. Stop, let's just chew on that for a minute. Remember how we talked about in our series on angels, that when God developed the plan, the scheme of redemption, it was for mankind, because we are the highest of God's creation. We are the ones that benefit from what it was Jesus did. So we celebrate God in that. He then goes on to say, in the latter part of 16, but he gives help to the descendants of Abraham. Therefore, he had to be made like his brethren in all things, that he might become a merciful, faithful high priest in things pertaining to God, to make propitiation for the sins of the people. For since he himself was tempted in that which he has suffered, he is able to come to the aid of those who are tempted. If you don't get comfort from that reading, I don't know what it would take. The fact that here is Christ. He empties himself into the form of mankind. Why? In order that he can understand what we go through on a day-by-day basis. That he can relate to us, the relatability. We were talking to the class on Job this morning about how Job longed for a mediator. And then God did ultimately send his son to be that mediator for us. That's what he's talking about here. But let's not remain just here. Go over to the couple more chapters, into the 4th chapter, and look down at verse 16. In verse 16, well, actually, you know what? Let's go back up to 14. So we're looking at Hebrews 4:14. Since then, we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast our confession, for we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weakness, but one who has been tempted in all things as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore, verse 16, let us therefore draw near with confidence to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy, find grace to help in time of need. What those verses are telling us is that Jesus knows the rigors of life, knows them. Just before I came up, and Amelia doesn't know this, but I saw it, and it was tender to me, really was. Because I can relate to what she's going through. I can relate to what Jacob's going through. But I was thinking of my wife, Linda, when our boys were little. And what happened with Amelia was precious, it was tender. It was what a mother does. Isaiah was eating something, and he had a little something on his hand, and he wanted it off as any kid would. And, he holds his hand up like this. So what Amelia did, without even thinking, wiped it off. Don't be mad at me, Amelia. I think it was tender. Then she wiped it on her dress. Relatability. Linda and I can relate to that. Been there, done that. I have done it with the boys when they were younger. They get some on their hand. I go, wipe it on my pant leg. Or wipe it on your mom's dress. She's not going to get up and talk before people. Whatever. See, what that does, I think it makes us human. And by being human and seeing the various things we go through, the relatability is there. It's great. I love it. I love to see it in various ones. And I want others to see it in me. Because I want to be approachable. I want you to feel comfortable to come talk to me. That's what we find in Christ. That God wanted him to be that high priest, to be that mediator, so that we could feel comfortable in a relationship with him, knowing that he suffered everything we suffer, yet without sin. Now, what I really appreciate, and it was terrible on the part of Christ, but the temptations that he faced. And we think, oh, they're just a one-time thing. Back in Matthew, the 4th chapter. Truly, that's not the case. But we are going to look at Matthew, the 4th chapter today. Now, we know that God does not tempt anyone to sin. We know that. We know that the tempter, Satan, does that. Even back in the days of Job, it was not God tempting Job to sin. God allowed Satan to tempt him. It was a testing. And you go, well, what's the difference between testing and tempting? Testing is to see the level of growth. Temptation is to kind of try to get the person to fall, to stumble. A good teacher is not going to take a student aside and say, you idiot, you can't pass this course at all. So why even try? That would be tempting to the student just to quit. But a good teacher will go back and say, you know what? I know you're having challenges with the course. Here's a list of suggested readings that'll help you. And if that doesn't help, there's tutors. And a really excellent teacher would say, you know what? My office hours are boom, boom, boom. You come in and I'll help you. I'll help you. That's what we find what God did for us. But sometimes we don't hear, we don't see. We're not as observant as we should be. And I did something today for a reason. Now, this is going to be hard on your part. Take 5 seconds and look at me. Look at me. I know that's going to be hard. 5 seconds. Do you see anything different? What do you see different? There you go. And these are old glasses. I just had the lenses put in them. Just change the prescription. But see, people, they don't really take time to see. He who has eyes, let him see. He who has ears, let him hear. So when we look at temptation and we think, oh, well, Jesus was tempted, we really don't stop to see the magnitude of what was involved. And they're not a one-time event. It's not just Matthew, the 4th chapter. It was continual. If you look at John, the 6th chapter and verse 15, the people wanted to take and make him king. He had fed the 5,000 plus. All right, let's take and make him king. You don't think that's a temptation? Here he is. He's God in the flesh. He is fully human. And when people lift you up and vaunt you up, boy, that does a lot to your ego. And you'd say, yeah, that's great. I would. What he had to do was remove himself. That was a temptation. You look at the 16th chapter of Matthew, verse 23. He openly admits there that it is tempting not to go to the cross. It's tempting. I really don't want to go. Who would want to do that? Who would want to go and have themselves brutalized and put to anguish, humiliated? The humiliation is one thing. Pain is another. Long-suffering anguish on the cross, something else. Yeah, it's tempting for him not to do that. But nevertheless, he did it. The temptation in the garden, let this cup pass from me. If it's possible, Father, let it pass from me. He was praying fervently. He's on the cross. If you are the Son of God, take yourself down. That's tempting. That's so tempting. It's palatable. But in all of these things, Christ did not sin. He did not succumb to temptation. Now, it's kind of interesting that Matthew, the 4th chapter, happens right after Jesus is baptized by John in Bethany beyond the Jordan. That he's led up by the Spirit in order to be tempted. It is just prior to his going out and teaching and preaching in a more public manner. But why? Why did he have to go through all of this? And the answer comes back to what we're looking at in Hebrews. That he had to be made like his brethren in all things. But when you go back and you look at Matthew 4, you realize that his temptation was a whole lot more involved than what we could ever even begin to fathom. Because what Satan does to us is on one plane. What he did to Christ was try to divide the nature of Jesus, the human side from the divine side. Divine side having the power to do what the human side wanted. Now, we know that within us, we have the soul and the spirit. We were talking about it on Wednesday night. And when you really begin to examine it, there's a whole lot more to it than just that. And individuals will say, well, this is what this says. Well, there's another verse that says this. Suffice it to say, we have the hidden person of the heart. We have a psyche and a pneuma, a soul and a spirit. One is directed toward animation of who we are. The other is directed toward God. So Satan tries to work there on us. Now, Christ, as he came in flesh, he had the psyche and the pneuma. But he also had the divine side. He went through a lot. A lot. Look over, if you would, in 2 Corinthians, 2nd chapter, and verse 11. Now remember, this is a follow-up letter of Paul to the first letter he mailed to the Corinthians. But now here in the second letter, the 2nd chapter, and verse 11. Watch what he says. And he's talking about the forgiveness that was granted on the part of the Corinthians that precipitated the first letter. But in verse 11, in order that no advantage be taken of us by Satan, for we are not ignorant of his schemes. Satan is wily, and I don't mean like Wile E. Coyote, but he is wily, he's devious, he is scheming, he is deceptive. And what he will do is he will study his prey in order to know exactly what's going to trip their trigger. He knows me really well. He knows where to tempt me. And he knows I would not be tempted by certain things. He knows that. He knows me so deeply. And so I have to keep my defenses up. I have to be on the alert. Because as Peter said, your adversary walks around like a roaring lion. So here is Satan. He is cunning. He is wily. He has schemes and plots and arrangements. And he knows the individual. Not that he's omniscient. He's not. but he knows the individual he wishes to attack. So when he comes to Christ with the temptation, or when he comes to us with temptation, he knows that it is going to be tempting us. I could not be lured out of this church building by the wafting smell of barbecued chicken. I could not. It wouldn't entice me one tiny little bit. But there are some of you who would smell that. And you'd get your nose going. And it might be tantalizing to you. I can't be tempted by that. Can't. But have a boiling pot of lobster with crabs, crab legs, crawdads, all sorts of shellfish. Crawdads got somebody. But that would be something that I would be interested in. Which reminds me, we haven't done that at the beach in a long, long time. Need to probably schedule that somewhere along the line. But temptation is something that is intrinsically of us, but it applies in one of three ways, which we'll talk about. But he knows us, and he'll appear as an angel of light if necessary. You look back in Ephesians 6 chapter and verse 11. You see all this explained and more. But it's also key to remember that Satan, while he came to tempt Jesus, there were certain things that he did not do. And Satan knew very well that Jesus presented a true challenge to him. And he would have to be at his top game in order to defeat Christ. Because if he could defeat Christ, he would undermine everything that deity had planned since before time even was. If he could just get Christ to succumb to even one of the temptations. Now, in an intimate level, yeah, Satan knew Jesus. He was aware of it. Because somewhere along the line, Satan even enticed angels to rebel against God and to sin. So, what didn't Satan do to him? What was it that he did not do to Christ in the temptation? Well, he didn't really tempt him to steal. He did not tempt him to commit some kind of gross immoral act at all. He did not tempt him to party hardy. He did not tempt him to do any of those things. But he knew precisely what things were and would be a temptation to Christ. So, let's get over into Matthew's account. And as we get into Matthew's account, let's go into the 4th chapter and begin looking at it. Matthew 4. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit, in the wilderness, to be tempted by the devil. And after he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he then became hungry. And the tempter came and said to him, all right, 40 days, fasting. Now, yesterday, the women were over at our house for a class that they had. Linda was directing the study. And so, in order to be hospitable, what she had done was she had prepared sausages and quiche and several other things in order for them to have afterwards. So she asked me, she said, will you stay in here and put this in at the right time, do this, do that? I said, great, I'll do that. So it was all prepared. The women came in, began to eat. And I forget which woman it was. Maybe it was Janice or somebody, I don't remember. Said, well, why don't you get a plate and eat with us? No. Doesn't entice me. And the reason it didn't entice me, the sausage was chicken sausage. The quiche was made with spinach in the middle. And I like raw spinach, just not cooked. And there were other things that weren't my forte. So I went without. By the time 3 o'clock in the afternoon came around, I was looking for something to eat. To which Linda said, well, there's plenty of food in the refrigerator. No. But I was ready, and I was tempted. But I said, no, I can find something better. Now, that was only 9 hours since I had had something to eat when I first got up. And I was already hungry. I can remember back in my younger days, having gone 2 days without food. And boy, was I ravenous. Can you imagine going 40 days without food? And then knowing that you had the power to take a stone and turn it into bread. So Satan comes to Jesus. Jesus is physically in a weakened state, open to temptation. Watch what the first one is. And it's provocative for a couple reasons. It starts out with if. That's a challenge. If Austin played football, which I believe he did, then Austin should be able to do X, Y, Z. So Austin, prove yourself. I wouldn't do that. I trust Austin. I trust him. Satan knew who Jesus was. From the human side, we're challenged when somebody comes with us, if. I know my limitations. And yes, I used to be able to do X, Y, Z. I have a witness, my wife. I can't do X, Y, and Z anymore. But I can teach somebody how to do X, Y, Z. I truly can. But even now, if somebody came and said, if, that would still provoke me to a challenge. And I would try. I truly would. That's human. That's human nature. If you are the Son of God, command that these stones become bread. You can do it. I know you can. What would have been the big thing if Christ would have done that? But he chooses not to. Prove yourself. Prove yourself. And then I'll believe. Satan already knew. So watch how Jesus responds. Man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. Watch the response of Satan. Verse 5. Then the devil took him into the holy city. What was the response of Satan? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Now, what we've got going on here is the lust of the flesh. That's what's going on here. A very primal aspect of the lust of the flesh. And all sin comes at us through the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, or the pride of life. All sin can be categorized into that level. So here comes Satan and he goes, all right, I'm going to make it provocative. I'm going to challenge you to prove your deity. And you have the power, because you're deity, to satisfy the lust of the flesh. Jesus said, I won't even dignify that. I will simply give you an answer. Man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. That's what we hold on to. That's where our strength, that's where our vitality is. Jesus had nothing to prove. Absolutely nothing to prove whatsoever. Austin has nothing to prove. Al has nothing to prove. Al used to run cross country. Are you going to tell Al to get out and run 12 miles? I laugh because I laugh. I think he could do it. I think he could do it. I don't know. I trust him. But he has nothing to prove. So Jesus said, I'm not even going to dignify that. How many times do we do that when a situation comes that we are that resolute? We say, I'm not going to dignify that. I won't. Jesus was able to overcome the lust of the flesh fairly quickly. And thanks be to God that he was. Now, stay right where we are. Look down. And as you look down, look at the second temptation in verse 5. Then the devil took him into the holy city. So they were down in the wilderness of Judea. Now they're up into Jerusalem. And he had him stand on the pinnacle of the temple and said to him, if you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, he will give his angels charge concerning you. And said, on their hands they will bear you up, lest you strike your foot against a stone. Again, does Jesus have anything to prove? No. What he's doing is suggesting that if Jesus does this spectacular thing, it's going to hasten mankind's reception of him. That's all he's suggesting. It's going to work out well. Now, what Satan does here is he twists the scriptures. And Jesus is aware of it. How often are we tempted with somebody twisting the scriptures? You know, well, have you looked at it this way? Because if you look at it this way, it's going to allow you to do this. No, I can't do that. I can't do that. We can't bend and twist the scriptures to meet whatever we want it to meet. And so Jesus realizes that. And Christ points out very quickly, I have nothing to prove. Again, if you are the Son of God. And he could have sat back and done what a lot of times we do. Well, if the end justifies the means, then it's got to be good. No. And that's where a lot of congregations get themselves in trouble. They say, well, you know, if we just did this, we would have this outcome. Well, is it consistent with the scriptures? Is it wholly in alignment with the scriptures? No. But, you know, if you look at it this way, we could justify. No. 1 Corinthians, the 11th chapter. The Corinthians had perverted the Lord's Supper. They made it into something that it was never intended to be, a common meal. And Paul sets the record straight in 1 Corinthians 11. Yet there are some today who have championed the cause of meeting in homes for the specific purpose of going back to the common meal and having to be part of the work and worship of the church. Never was intended to be that. But they go, well, we get more in attendance by doing that. The end doesn't justify the means. And that's what Satan is trying to get Jesus to do here. Trying to twist the scriptures to fit his needs. Now, look what goes on in response. Verse 7. Jesus said to him, on the other hand, it is written, you shall not put the Lord your God to the test. Some translations state it this way, you shall not tempt the Lord your God. By stating it that way, Jesus is indicating that it was provocative to him. It was a temptation. But what he was able to do was he was able to take and turn the scriptures back against Satan and use it against him. Well, our time's up for this morning. We got through two of the temptations. This afternoon we'll come back and we'll deal with the other one and then the application therein. But when you begin to really look at the temptations of Jesus, you begin to put them into context with what's seen in Hebrews, the 2nd and the 4th chapter. You realize that Jesus is relatable, that he can understand us, and how great that is, because he, according to God's pattern and plan, serves as our mediator and serves as our high priest. In relatability, we all struggle with many things. Over the years, I have been very candid about where I was at one time. And the reason I do that is not to have people look at me for whatever reason, but I do that to allow them to know I can relate to what they're going through. I can understand. And I'm willing to be there to help, to be able to comfort, to be able to instruct. That's all it's about. That's what we're called upon to do in the scriptures. We're called upon to follow the example of Christ and to be there for one another. Confess your sins to one another. Pray for one another. And I'm not, saying, oh, everybody come forward and just open it up and all your dirty laundry. That's not what I'm saying. Because there is a hesitancy on our part of sharing with others. When we need help, we need to open up. When we need help, we need to find strength from others. And we need to develop that closeness. We can develop that closeness with Christ. And by him being our mediator, our high priest, by going through him to our Father, we can cast our anxieties onto him. We can ask for strength during times of temptation. And that's the beauty of what we're seeing in Matthew 4. If you're here this morning and not a child of God, we'd love nothing more than to have the opportunity to sit down and study with you, to show you from God's word what it would take to become a child of his. You may have already done that. You put Christ on in the waters of baptism, but you need the prayers of the congregation for strength and or encouragement. We'll be more than happy to assist you in your spiritual needs.